characters will make you angry, but that's a good thing. It shows she's a good writer. Carried on straight pretty much up. The ending was just incredible. She got quite famous off getting jumped. Hello my angels, welcome back to another video. Today we are doing my September wrap up, which means we are also wrapping up Bookoplathon and the magical readathon. Now you may notice we're in a little bit of a different background. This is because the lighting in my library right now is absolutely awful. The weather is really, really gloomy outside, and for some reason the only place in the house where the lighting is good is in my bedroom. It's a little bit echoey, so I do apologize for anything that sounds a bit off with that as well. So without further ado, let's just dive right in. So in September I read 7 books. I did have 10 on my TBR. I also mood read 2, so I technically only read 5 books from my TBR. Honestly, it's to be expected. I am a bit of a mood reader sometimes, and especially when I was getting quite stressed with exams, I was not surprised that I turned to some easy reads or also just read whatever I felt like reading at the time. So of those 7 books, I read 4 physical books, 2 audiobooks, and 1 ebook, coming to a total of 2,980 pages, which is actually a lot less than I thought it would be for 7 books. But I did read 2 really short ones and 2 really big ones, so I guess it kind of evened out in the middle. We'll start out with my favourite book from the month, and that was Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the gorgeous Goldsboro edition. I have already done an Instalove review for this, so if you do want to hear in-depth thoughts, then please do go check that out. But Black Sun is about... It's kind of awkward to explain because the synopsis isn't actually, I feel, very much like what the book is actually about. It's actually like, the synopsis is super vague. But basically, in the holy city of Tova, there is the winter solstice, and a god will return when the earth and sky converge under the black sun. So there's a lot about gods, there's a lot about worship. There are 2 non-binary characters that use Z/Zir pronouns. The female main character, or one of the female main characters, is bisexual. There's different races that have different, there's almost like different powers. They're also looked down on, so it's not like a prevalent thing. Like magic is not really a prevalent thing. And also there's loads of different clans that worship different gods, but in the main kind of story there is focus on the crow god, and there's a lot of politics. Everything is kind of centering around this convergence, and each chapter says, like, you know, 5 months till convergence, or, you know, one of them could be 10 years till convergence. And like, I really, really loved the setup of that, and it felt like the pacing of the book was incredible. I was hooked all of the way, and I just really loved all of the characters as well. Like, I didn't prefer one perspective over the other. There are 3 different perspectives, and I loved all 3. I wasn't like hankering after more of one. And yeah, this was a full 5 stars. Probably a contender for top book of the year against Middle Game. Like, they're my top 2 right now. So that's going to be kind of a hard decision that I'm not going to have to make until January, but it's fine. I don't know really how to convey to you how much I fucking love this book. I'm so excited for the sequel. Sequel's out in April, and I'm going to do everything I can to get my hands on an arc of it because this is just incredible. Next up, I read Royal Assassin. I'm holding up Assassin's Quest because I am currently reading this and it was right next to me, so it was easier to reach for it. But I read Royal Assassin, which is the sequel to Assassin's Apprentice, the 2nd book in the Farseer trilogy. I'm gonna put this down so that people don't get too confused. So Royal Assassin started off pretty much straight from where Assassin's Apprentice ended. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a good continuation, but there weren't quite as many emotional moments for me, or as many bonds with like animals, or like emotional moments. Plot twists as well, I found a little bit lacking compared to the first book. The first book really, really had me like gasping and really like kind of het up towards the end, like of the climax of the book, whereas Royal Assassin was a bit less exciting. And it's even worse with Assassin's Quest. I don't take this as a bad thing though, because I love the story and I love the characters. I think it's just like the longness And I do wish there was more plot revealed to you at different points. It is kind of like in it for the long game, and then the ending will be worth it, which is kind of similar to how I feel about Brandon Sanderson's books. Even though they are masterpieces, it's like you kind of have to hang on and wait till the end and then it'll all be worth it kind of thing. And that's not for everyone, but clearly it works for me. Clearly I do enjoy books like that because I am still continuing Brandon Sanderson and I'm still continuing Robin Hobb. Kind of do with that information what you will. I'd say like the plot of the stories is kind of hard to explain because it's so drawn out. It's just basically around this guy Fitz. He's the bastard of the king in waiting. He gets trained to be an assassin. And then there's just a lot of politics, a lot of like background epic fantasy going on. There used to be dragons around, but they're gone now. But like supposedly they're asleep or something. And like there's just a lot of like high level plot going on in the background that isn't really important to Fitz at that moment in the books. So it's very much in his head and following him. And also he like really, really loves this girl Molly and she's so fucking annoying. I hate her so much. And she's even worse in Assassin's Quest, even though there's hardly any of her in it. So yeah, I did give Royal Assassin 4 stars. Would still recommend Robin Hobb in general. Like, characters will make you angry, but that's a good thing. It shows she's a good writer. Next up was one of my mood reads, and that was Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff. This is the lovely Illumicrate edition that I really, really like. It's just incredible. This I ended up giving 5 stars. At one point I was going to give it 4 because it was a little bit slow and by the end there wasn't really that kind of plot twist or like reveal that I had learned to expect from J. Kristoff when it comes to his adult fantasy, aka Nevernight. But then the twists did happen and I really enjoyed them and they really actually took me by surprise in a good way, similar to how the Nevernight twists did. I was happy in the end with this. This is about a world where vampires have completely taken over because the sun has kind of gone to bed. They're in like a permanent eclipse kind of situation. Hence, vampires can roam around as much as they want. And there are 4 bloodlines that each have different powers. And the main character is a half vampire and he goes to like a monastery to become a fighter type monk type thing to fight vampires, and most of the time one of them will be like descended from one of those bloodlines and has like one of those powers, but our character does not have any of those powers. He is what they call a frail blood. Yeah, I mean, I love J. Kristoff's writing when it comes to epic fantasy, so I was not surprised that I liked this style of writing. If you didn't like Nevernight, I highly doubt that you will like this. I know that it's not for everyone. It's not necessarily something I'd recommend to everyone either. It's like kind of quite niche and, I mean, not niche, he's a best-selling author, quite a lot of people like it, but I wouldn't recommend it to everyone as a blanket recommendation because I know why. I guess what I'm trying to say is I can see why some people don't like it, but I ended up giving it 5 stars. After waiting 2 years for it to come out, it definitely paid off and I was glad for the length after waiting that long as well. And yeah, pretty happy with this one. Next, I read The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is a reprint of one of her more older books because she got quite famous off Gods of Jade and Shadow and Mexican Gothic. So the publishers decided to pick up her older books as well. This again is a nice Goldsboro edition. This is quite short, only like just under 300 pages. This is definitely more of a historical fiction than I thought. I thought it would be way more speculative historical, but it's basically historical fiction with a kind of added element of fantastical, which doesn't really need to be there, I think. Our main character, Nina, has telekinetic powers, and that means that she can move stuff with her mind. She is the only person other than this one guy, Hector, the kind of love interest that she meets, who has any kind of power. No other powers are ever referenced or mentioned from anyone else. Everyone kind of calls her a witch when back home where she's from, but she wants to go into high society, kind of like debutante lady stuff, kind of like in I want to say like Elizabethan / Victorian era. There's motor cars. I think that's like a new thing at that point. So it's kind of like on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution, I think. But basically she wants to debut, as it were, for the grand season. And the beautiful ones are kind of what are referred to as the people who are like the highest of society. So she goes to stay with her cousin, who is kind of like the top dog woman in this place. And she meets this guy Hector, who is a traveling circus man who is like made his own way basically by doing his telekinetic power stuff. And basically they meet, she falls in love with him, and like they court, and like he teaches her stuff to do with the powers. But then it's like all mystery is like, oh, why is he really there? Why is like he around all the time and this and that? Basically, Hector has a secret. And the way this was set up is actually you find out what the secret is in the very first chapter. Because in the synopsis it's like, oh, this man has a bitter secret. What is it? But then in the first chapter you find out. And when I first read it, I was a bit annoyed because I was like, oh, well, where's all the intrigue gone? But it actually made for quite an interesting dynamic as a reader, because you knew all these things that Nina didn't, and watching it unfold in front of you is actually quite a different experience rather than being in Nina's head and watching it unfold with her and finding out with her. So I thought that was a really interesting way of like actually writing the story. It's definitely just kind of like a historical fiction drama, but I actually really enjoyed it. It was really fun. I gave it 3 stars because it wasn't like the greatest thing in the world, but again, this stuff isn't really my type of thing anyway. I did expect there to be more of a focus on the speculative part, so like the powers part, and that other people would have powers as well. But no, she is the only one, her and Hector are the only ones who have powers. So in terms of like logic of the world, that was kind of something you had to suspend disbelief with, unfortunately. I struggled with that, but it was really quick, it was really easy. I actually really enjoyed the characters. This was very character-based, and I enjoyed the way that the story went out and the way it resolved. So it was just a fun read. It was a 3, maybe a 3.5. Like, if I could give a half, I would, kind of thing. But yeah, it was alright, it was good. I'd recommend it for easy reading. I did forget to mention that I listened to most of Royal Assassin on audiobook. So the second audiobook that I read during the month was All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. I have heard people raving about this series of novellas, and it's basically about this robot that is kind of like, he's got organic bits, but he is a robot, and he is kind of like a droid that he's on hire. He is owned by a company, and he gets hired out kind of as security basically on different planets. So in the first installment, he has been hired out to help people who are doing like geology on a planet or something. You know, they're getting samples and stuff. But some shit goes down basically, and he has to help them out. The character itself is kind of the main focus, because it's basically about him being quite a sarcastic, awkward robot who likes to watch lots of serials and soaps and things, and he like downloads gigabytes worth of TV shows to watch whilst people are like talking around him. And it kind of like pokes at him into becoming human and seeing like how human he is and how he has human emotions, but he just actually doesn't care about anyone or anything. So it was quite interesting to read. It was very funny. I did enjoy it. I listened to it on Scribd. I ended up giving it 4 stars because the plot was a little bit lacking for me. I didn't think it was that great. And the characters in that didn't really make up for it. Like, I really liked Murderbot, but I didn't really like any of the other characters or care about them. I guess I was Murderbot in that instance because he didn't care about them either. But yeah, it was a really fun, really quick read. I really enjoyed it. So 4 solid stars, to be honest. The ebook that I read this month was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. Ages ago, I read Sorcery of Thorns, and I really enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars. This one ended up as a 3. It was not as strong as A Sorcery of Thorns in its premise, I thought, although I really loved the world and the premise, actually. The plot was definitely just not strong enough for this. I did feel like it needed a good, 100 more pages. It was only just over 300 or only just under 300, I think. It definitely needed more padding, and it was very insta-love, even though there definitely was some room to make it not insta-love. I didn't feel like it needed to be that rushed at the beginning. It definitely didn't need to be, and it kind of took away from the kind of will they, won't they, or like enemies kind of bit later on, because it was like, well, she already thought that she was in love with him kind of thing on like page 10 or whatever. I would have preferred it to have been a lot more enemies to lovers near the beginning, but you know, it is what it is. I always enjoy stories about fairies, to be honest, in fairy worlds. It's kind of one of my favourite settings to have, favourite types of characters to have, because I love fae, I love mischievous like characters, and I also like in D&D, like I really like in being kind of confronted with fae and like having to deal with them and stuff, and like the idea of having to be really careful about what you say around them and what you agree to and things is like a very interesting dynamic to me. So that is like one of my top things. But the plot was a little bit lacking, unfortunately. So yeah, 3 stars total. The very last book that I read in September was The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. This is the lovely Waterstones edition. Wish I had a matching first edition, but they didn't do one. God knows why. This was amazing. This is the sequel to A Deadly Education. A Deadly Education I gave 4.5 really, but rounded down to 4 stars. This was a full 5 stars. Everything about the characters was just amped up, especially like all of the character development and the relationships between the characters. I love the setting of the Scholomance. I just think it's so unique. I don't think anyone has ever really come up with something like this before. I just really, really enjoyed the writing style as well. And I know a lot of people don't, but for some reason, I just really, really vibe with being in Elle's head all of the time, and how she just fucking hates everyone and she just wants to get on with her life and doesn't want to be bothered by anyone. But then like the character development of her starting to care about people and thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, I actually now like can choose to be a good person. And oh, it's just so good. And Orion Lake is so fucking funny. I just think it's so hilarious how awkward he is. It's just so funny, and I really, really enjoyed this. I had a smile on my face like most of the time. I actually genuinely teared up at a good few different scenes during this, although I will say I never kind of really doubted that they would get out of the Scholomance, that they would graduate, because Elle and Orion are so powerful. I kind of never really doubted that they would get out fine. Even when like their plans changed and stuff, I kind of always knew they would be fine, which she's kind of created like 2 really, really OP characters. So there wasn't really any point where I felt scared for them, but like the ending was just incredible. I did not expect it, did not see it coming. And yeah, I'm actually now really pissed that I have to wait for another year to get the 3rd one. I think it's just a trilogy, because it's just called like lesson 2 of the Scholomance. It's not called like book 2. It's not like book 2 of 3 is what I mean. I might look it up after this, but yeah, 5 stars. Absolutely brilliant. I do just want to run quickly through the books that I did not manage to read on my September TBR. So these were Ninth House and For the Wolf. I am not too bothered about these because they are the character creation prompts for Aurelian, which is the magical readathon. So I'm not too mad that I didn't read those, because I was just giving myself a challenge. Like, you can read those character creation prompts anytime between now and April. So I managed to read one, and that was an Enchantment of Ravens. That was one of my character creation prompts. And then the other 2 were Ninth House and For the Wolf, which were, I think, Dark Academia and Set Outside. So those were the prompts for those. I did actually end up skipping one prompt from the, what's it called? The Path, the Novice Path. So the Novice Path for the Magical Readathon, I only skipped one prompt, and that was the Spooky Book prompt. So I'm quite proud of that. I got 6 out of the 7 prompts, plus 1 character creation prompt. So I'm really pleased. The book I was going to read for that was My Best Friend's Exorcism. If I do have time in October, I may just tack it on the end, because it does seem like quite a fitting book for October. I did also miss out on Threadneedle, even though I have read half of it. I'm probably just going to finish that this month when I do a bit of driving down to visit friends. And then I also did need to read She Who Became the Sun. Now, that I'm not too bothered about, because it is my Patreon pick anyway, so I'm just going to have to read it in October, so that's absolutely fine. So I read 7 out of the 9 prompts for Bookoplathon as well. I just replaced replaced some of the books for some of my cards or some of my stops. I wasn't, you know, it's fine. The 2 prompts that I didn't manage to get for Bookoplathon were Feed Scroll and Fairy Tale. So those are the 2 ones that I didn't manage to get to, which were Threadneedle and For the Wolf. But like I said, I still read 7 books last month despite having 2 quite stressful exams, so I'm really, really pleased. I am hoping I can keep up that kind of pace in October because I do have 2 more exams in the middle of October. I currently, as of today filming, actually have nearly finished my first book, and it's 850 pages, so there's that. But I also need to read a good few other books this month. But some of them are quite short, so I'm feeling really good. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do give it a like if you do, and also make sure you subscribe to get more content from me. And all of my links are in the description, including my Patreon. Speaking of my Patreon, I want to give a huge shout out to everyone at my Deity tier. So that is Becca, Meg, Amy, Lydia, Lisa, Mercy, and Sarah. Thank you guys so much for all of your support, and I will see you in another video. Bye!